Hare Krishna. Welcome to all the devotees online. Thank you very much for your kind presence and association as we continue Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 1, Chapter 13, verses 1 to 7, actually. Dhritarashtra quits home. Cover the Mangal Charan prayers. Om Jnanatime Vandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam yena tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Akadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Tapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhe Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Sarva Sastra Vyusha Sarva Vedeka Satpala Sarva Tidanda Ratnadya Sarva Lokai Triprada Sarva Bhagavata Prana Srimad Bhagavato Prabhu Kalidwando Didaditya Shri Krishna Parivartita O Srimad Bhagavatam, O nectar churned from the ocean of all Vedic scriptures, O most pure and transfer fruit of all the Vedas, O you are enriched with the jewels of all spiritual philosophical conclusions, O you grant spiritual vision to all the people of the world, O life breath of the Vaishnava devotees, O Lord, you are the sun which has arisen to dispel the darkness of Kali Yuga. You are Lord Krishna who has returned amongst us. Paramananda Bhattaya Prema Varsha Sharayate Sarvada Sarva Sevyaya Shri Krishnaya Namastute O Srimad Bhagavatam. I offer respectful obeisance unto you. By reading one attains transcendental bliss. For your syllables rain pure love of God upon reader. You are always to be served by everyone, for you are incarnation of Lord Krishna. Madekabando Mad Sangim Mad Guru Mad Mahadana Mad Nishtaraka Mad Bhagya Madananda Namastute O Srimad Bhagavatam. O my only friend, O my companion, O my teacher, O my great wealth, O my deliverer, O my good fortune, O my bliss, I offer respectful obeisances unto you. Asadu Sadhu Tadahi Attini Chocha Taraka Anamunchakada Chinmam Premna Rikatyospura O Srimad Bhagavatam. O give us saintliness to the unsaintly, O uplift to the very fallen. Please do not ever leave me. Please become manifest. My heart and my throat accompany pure love of Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Janmadhyasya Yatonvayaditarata, Charte Swabhigna Swarat, Tene Brahma Hidaya Adikavaye Muyanti Yatsuraya. Tejo vari mridam yatha vinimayo yatvatir sargom marsha damna swena sada nirastapuakam satyam param dhimahi. O my Lord Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva, O pervading personality of Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisance unto you. I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth and the primary cause of all causes of creation, sustenance, and destructions of the manifested universes. He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations, and he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him. It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahma, the original living being. By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion, as one is bewildered by illusory representation of water seen in fire or land seen on water. Only because of him do the material universe is temporarily manifested by the reactions of the three modes of nature appear factual, although they are unreal. I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna, who is eternally existent in a transcendental abode, which is forever free from illusory representation of material world. I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth. Prayana Upaisha Sabya Kalavasmin Yuge Jana Mandasmandam Tayo Mandabhagyupadratha. O learned one, in this age of Kali, many but short lives, that quarrelsome, lazy, misguided, unlucky, and above always disturbed. Narayana Namaskrityam Narachevam Narottamam Devim Saraswati Vyasam Tato Jayamudire. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisance unto the personality of Godhead, Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, and the Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Savaipum Soparo Dharmo Yato Bhaktira Dokchaja Ahituke Pratyata Yatma Suprasidati. The supreme occupation dharma for all humanity is that by which men can attain to loving devotional service under the transcendent Lord. Such devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted, completely satisfy the self. Vasudeva Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janayatya Savairagyam Yanam Chayad Ahaitukam By rendering devotional service unto the personhood of God at Shri Krishna, one immediately acquires causeless knowledge and detachment from the world. Vadanti tat tattvavidas tattvam yat gnanam advayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti sabhyate. Learned transcendentals who know the absolute truth called the non-dual substance, Brahman, Paramatma Bhagavan. Shru Shru Shroshadanasya Vasudeva Kataruchi Syan Mahat Sevaya Vipra Punya Tirtha Nishevanat. Otherwise, one says by serving those devotees who are completely free from all vice, great service is done. By such service, one gains affinity for hearing the messages of Vasudeva. Shranvatam Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Veddantastoya Bhadrani Vidunati Suritsatam. Shri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, who is Paramatma, supersoul in everyone's heart and the benefactor of the truthful devotee, cleanses desire for material enjoyment from the heart of the devotee who has developed the urge to hear his messages, which are in themselves virtuous when properly heard and chanted. Nasta prayashu bhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavatutama sloke bhaktir bhavati neshtiki. By regular attendance in the classes on the Bhagavatam and by rendering of service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praise or transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We continue Srimad Bhagavatam based on the teachings of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Hare Krishna. Let us recap, if those that were present last week, anything that comes to your mind, anything you remembered from Canto 1, Chapter 12, verses 30 to 36, last part of the glorification of Parikshit Maharaj by the Brahmanas. So if there's anything that comes to your mind or that you remembered, that you took home, please share in the chat and we'll take that feedback if there is any. Give you a few minutes. Our regulars that normally comment are not here, so the unregulars or those that don't comment, let's see if you have few comments. All right, so we'll just, in the last section of verses, we covered Maharaj Parikshit's glories by the Brahmanas, and the Brahmanas are foretelling the characteristics of Maharaj Parikshit and also his activities. And Vedic astrologers and Brahmanas have the ability to do this, just like Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada, when astrologers saw his picture, Srila Prabhupada, the astrologer predicted that Srila Prabhupada would open 108 temples. He would build a house in which the whole world can live. So like that, astrologers are able to see the future, which is already in essence predestined according to karma, in terms of one's activities and what one would receive. So Maharaj Parikshit's glories were foretold, and Maharaj Yudhishthira, the Pandavas, were very happy to hear about this glorious child and his activities. So moving into chapter 13, Sutta Goswami now is going to share, he's going to speak about Vidura coming back, and Bhagavatam is not sequential in that all the Leelas are sequential one after another. There may be specific pastimes or narrations that come before the other, because it's a dialogue and a discussion between two different personalities, the sages, Sutta Goswami, Sukadeva Goswami, Maharaj Parikshit. And the sages want to hear about Maharaj Parikshit's activities. And the Brahmanas now have foretold of those activities. So before Sutta Goswami starts to speak about Maharaj Parikshit's coronation and activities, he first discusses the pastime of Vidura returning to help his elder brother and Dhritarashtra. And then we're also going to hear about Krishna's disappearance, and we're going to hear about the Pandavas leaving this world. And then we will hear about the pastimes of Maharaj Parikshit. So we're going to be covering the section 1 to 7, verses 1 to 7. Vidura returns to Hastinapur from the pilgrimage places. Text 1. Suto vacham vidurastirta yatrayam maitreyad atmanogatim gnatvagat dastinapuram taya vapta vipitsita. Sutta Goswami said, while traveling on a pilgrimage, Vidura received knowledge of the destination of the self from the great sage Maitreya, and then returned to Hastinapur. He became well versed in the subject as he desired. So Vidura was the younger brother and of Dhritarashtra, and also he was a counselor, very, very learned, and like a minister, he would give counseling. And as we'll share, Vidura's qualities were super excellent. And he always sided with Dharma. So naturally, he did not side with the war. And he definitely didn't side with Duryodhan. But Duryodhan, being who he is, he did not like Vidura, and he banished Vidura. So Vidura took that as Krishna's mercy, and he left and went on places of pilgrim. Just like we see Balaram. Balaram also didn't want to take part in the war. So Balaram also went on pilgrimage. You people fight, I'm out of here. So Vidura also, he said, well, this is Krishna's arrangement that I'm getting banished. And in fact, Duryodhan chastised Vidura, who are you, giving counsel to my father? You just leave. And for all your services, the only compensation is your breath. So Vidura had to leave practically with nothing. But being a devotee of Krishna, he was surrendered to Krishna, depended on Krishna, and he left for pilgrimage. And while on pilgrimage, he met Maitreya Muni. And he inquired about Krishna consciousness from Maitreya Muni. That will be coming in the Bhagavatam as well. We'll hear the discussion. So after getting Krishna consciousness and the knowledge of Krishna consciousness from Maitreya Muni, then he comes back thinking about Dhritarashtra, to save Dhritarashtra. So then he returns. So this is the discussion. So Prabhupada explains about Vidura, one of the most prominent figures in the history of the Mahabharata. He was conceived by Vyasadeva in the womb of the maid servant of Ambika, mother of Maharaj Pandu. He is the incarnation of Yamaraj. Being cursed by Manduka Muni, he was to become a Sudra. The story is narrated as follows. Once upon a time, the state police caught some thieves who had concealed themselves in the hermitage of Manduka Muni. The police constables, as usual, arrested all the thieves and Manduka Muni along with them. The magistrate specifically punished the Muni to death by being pierced with a lance. When he was just to be pierced, the news reached the king, and he at once stopped the act on consideration of his being a great Muni. The king personally begged the Muni's pardon for the sake of his men, and the saint at once went to Yamaraj, who prescribed the destinies of the living beings. So we can appreciate Manduka Muni was no ordinary sage. He could, if he could travel to see Yamaraj, that means he did not require permission to enter planets which human beings cannot enter, and he could travel beyond matter and dimension. So no doubt, a very, very powerful sage. And lucky the king's, king stopped his killing Manduka Muni. Otherwise, Brahmana Hatya, he would have got a grievous reaction. So he was saved in time. But Manduka Muni was not very happy with even that little reaction, which was causing, let's say, undue anxiety. So he went to Yamaraj. Yamaraj, being questioned by the Muni, replied that the Muni in his childhood, so let's see, Yamaraj, being questioned by the Muni, replied that the Muni in his childhood pierced an ant with a sharpened straw, and for that reason, he was put into difficulty. The Muni thought it was unwise on the part of Yamaraj that he was punished for his childish innocence, and thus the Muni cursed Yamaraj to become a Sudra. And this Sudra incarnation of Yamaraj was known as Vidura, the Sudra brother of Dhritarashtra and Maharaj Pandu. Both the Sudra son of the Kuru dynasty was equally treated by Bhishma Dev, along with his other nephews, and in due course Vidura was married with a girl who was also born in the womb of a Sudrani by a Brahmana. Although Vidura did not inherit the property of his father, the brother of Bhishma Dev, still he was given sufficient state property by Dhritarashtra, the elder brother of Vidura. Vidura was very much attached to his elder brother, and all along he tried to guide him on the right path. During the fratricidal war of Kurukshetra, Vidura repeatedly implored his elder brother to do justice to the sons of Pandu. But Dhritarashtra did not like such interference. But Duryodhana did not like such interference by his uncle, and thus he practically insulted Vidura. This resulted in Vidura's leaving home for pilgrimage and taking instructions from Maitreya. So the one point in regards to, as a child, Yamaraj says the Muni was piercing an ant, and because of that, he had to get the reaction. So we know that there's the principle in the law of karma: every action has equal and opposite reaction, and no action is really excused until there is atonement or punishment. So as a child, this is how Yamaraj gave his due, or gave the due result or punishment to the Muni. And now the Muni naturally wasn't happy, and he cursed Yamaraj, and he also he declared certain changes in the law, like children below 13 should not be liable for karma, etc. Prabhupada does make the point that children below 5 years, they don't have any reaction that they suffer because of the innocence. So that's, there are different concessions in terms of children because of innocence. Generally, it's the parents' reaction. But in this case, the Muni had to go through that. And it is described that this was also arranged by the Lord, because Vidura, as Yamaraj, was not getting any association. He wanted to be in Krishna's pastimes, and at Yamaloka, there's only the Yamadutas that don't ask any Krishna conscious questions. The only time they ask Krishna conscious questions is when they meet the Vishnu Dutas and they can't do their job. Then they return back to Yamaraj and says, well, Yamaraj, you know what happened? We couldn't bring a Jamil. Oh, why couldn't you bring a Jamil? We were stopped by Vishnu Dutas, and then they started inquiring, who's this Vishnu Dutas? They said there's somebody greater than you. And then Yamaraj becomes very happy because now at least he has an opportunity to speak about Krishna consciousness. So Yamaraj wanted to be involved in Krishna consciousness, and in this way he was cursed to take birth as Vidura, as a Sudra. And even though he took birth as a Sudra, it did not impact his nature as a great devotee of Krishna. And we'll hear about some of his qualities, exemplary qualities. So Vidura plays a very, very important role in the Mahabharata as a counselor. It is described that the essence of Vidura's character was that he could understand what was right and wrong. So he had an extremely good understanding of right and wrong. And we find in Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says that somebody in the mode of goodness, he knows what is right and what is wrong. Whereas somebody in the mode of ignorance, they cannot distinguish between right and wrong. In fact, sometimes they accept things which are right as wrong and wrong as right. So Vidura was extremely sober and Krishna conscious. He could able to identify, due to his brilliant intelligence and Krishna consciousness, what's right and wrong. He presented the truth without hesitation. He advised the king without any fear, always remained unbiased, never crossed limits, and never supported the war. And some of his qualities he's that pious, polite, patriot, prudent, practical, perceptive, great devotee of Krishna. So in this way, we can understand if we had to have such a counselor, such a guide in our lives, it will be glorious. And if somebody has such a guide in one's life, that's fortunate. Dhritarashtra was fortunate to have Vidura in his life because of these traits, that he was straightforward, he could tell the truth, he did not fear, especially as a counselor, minister. If you fear the king, oh no, he's gonna tell me to leave. If I tell him the truth, he may fire me, or he may not pay me well. So in this way, you then become biased. You really become an enemy and not a well-wisher. So Vidura was a well-wisher, true and true. He was happy to speak the truth and guide the king at any cost, even if it meant him being fired or killed or exploited. It did not matter. So this is a real minister. This is a real guide. So no doubt Vidura played a very essential role, even to the extent of telling Dhritarashtra to kill his son when Duryodhana was born. Vidura said there are many ill omens, and therefore this is a sign of inauspiciousness. This is a sign that he will destroy the whole dynasty. And better to sacrifice a son than to sacrifice a dynasty. So you have to kill him. Naturally, Dhritarashtra was not only blind physically, but also spiritually, and therefore he could not accept the wise advice of Vidura. Text 2. Yavatat kritavan prashnan shatash kaushara vakakrata jataika bhaktir govinde tebyas choparar ramaha. After asking various questions and becoming established in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, Vidura retired from putting questions to Maitreya Muni. Vidura retired from putting questions before Maitra Muni when he was convinced by Maitra Rishi that the summum bonum of life is to be finally situated in transcendental loving service of Lord Shri Krishna, who is Govinda, and who satisfies his devotees in all respects. So very, very wonderful opening sentence by Srila Prabhupada. Vidura was inquiring about spiritual subject matters, one after another. So that is an important lesson, even in our spiritual journey, that we must inquire about spiritual subject matter. Now, when we inquire about spiritual subject matter, just like before we came to Krishna consciousness, in most cases, very often, we may have a question and somebody is telling us Krishna consciousness and giving us Krishna consciousness, especially on the level of the soul. You know, you're not your body, your spiritual soul, who is God, you are a servant of God, etc. So that basic knowledge becomes the foundation of your Krishna consciousness. From no Krishna consciousness, you start to become Krishna conscious, but on a, let's say, if we are to use a word, basic level. Then you now inquire from that level of Krishna consciousness to the next level and progress further. For example, you may begin to ask about association of devotees or faith, different levels of faith, how to strengthen faith, how to get good association, etc. And this way, one establishes knowledge on that level and grows. Then one begins to inquire about devotional service, and one begins to grow from that level. Then one begins to inquire about Nata Nivriti and grows further. So like that, it's important that we keep inquiring about our next step in our evolution in spiritual life. And this way, as we progress up to the stage of prema, the questioning never stops. Even though we understand the goal, pure love of Krishna, but it's important to measure and inquire according to one's level to take the next step in one's spiritual journey. So Vidura, like that, was inquiring one question after another, and then finally when the summum bonum, the conclusion of life, was given, which is to be situated in transcendental loving service of Lord Krishna, who is Govinda, or, and Prabhupada says, one who satisfies his devotees in all respects. So we know the word or the name Govinda means one who satisfies one's senses, the land, or cows. So Krishna, he satisfies the devotees' senses in all respect. The conditioned soul, the living being in material existence, seeks happiness by employing his senses in the mode of materialism, but that cannot give him satisfaction. He then searches after the supreme truth by empiric philosophical speculative methods and intellectual feats. But if he does not find the ultimate goal, he again goes down to the material activities and engage himself in various philanthropic and altruistic work, which all fail to give him satisfaction. So neither the fruit of activities nor dry's philosophical speculation can give one satisfaction, because by nature, a living being is the eternal servitor of the Supreme Lord Shri Krishna. And by all Vedic literatures, and all the Vedic literatures give him direction towards the ultimate end. Bhagavad Gita 15:15 confirms this statement. So Prabhupada is describing the living entities are searching for happiness. The goal of life is to be happy. But people don't know how to be happy. And they don't know how to be happy because they do not inquire about their intrinsic true nature, who they are. When people, souls know that they are spiritual beings, part and parcel of Krishna, now they can understand what will make them happy. Just like a gross example, if I'm a gardener, then I cannot do accounting job. If I'm an accountant, it becomes very difficult for me to gardening because I am not a gardener. A gardener can look after a garden nicely. An accountant can look after the books nicely. So according to one's nature, one's activities will be effective in that field. Similarly, if living entities do not inquire who they are, then naturally they're going to have a false identity. And based on that false identity, they will embrace a pursuit of happiness in the direction of that false identity. And because living entities consider them to be this body, consider them that they're this body, then they will endeavor to be satisfied through fruitive activities, and they will never be happy. They'll become frustrated. And because of that frustration, then the next level is impersonalism. Srila Prabhupada in one lecture was making the point that the Mayavadis or impersonalists, they talk about Jagat Mithya Brahma Satya. So they renounce the world, trying to become one with Brahman and experience the pleasure of Brahman. But they fall down back to philanthropic and altruistic work. So Prabhupada asked in lecture, Prabhupada was asking devotees, this was during a nectar of devotion lecture in Vrindavan, during Kartik actually. Srila Prabhupada asked the devotees, how come they fall down? And, they renounce the world, they become sannyasis, and then they fall down and they become philanthropic, they open schools and wells and hospitals. Right? So how is it that their philosophy is Brahma Satya Jagat Mithya? Only Brahman is truth and this material creation is false. And they give up this false material creation to try to experience the joy of Brahman, but then they fall down back to opening schools and hospitals, which is part of the falsity that they call Mithya. How is it? And Prabhupada says, because they have not experienced the joy of Brahman. If they had experienced the joy of Brahman, then they would not fall back down to low activities. But the fact that they did not experience the joy of Brahman means they have to be satisfied with the happiness of the material nature, the lower happiness. So neither the fruitive activities nor the dry philosophical speculators can be fully satisfied. Only those who are eternal servants of Krishna. Why? Because that's the true nature of the living entity. So therefore, the devotee is the only one who is peaceful, shanta. Otherwise, all others are ashanta, not peaceful, in anxiety. So Vidura received this ultimate knowledge that without being Krishna conscious, without surrendering to Krishna, without being a servant of Krishna, there is no satisfaction. Like Vidura, an inquisitive conditioned soul must approach a bona fide spiritual master like Maitreya, and by intelligent inquiries must try to know everything about karma, fruitive activities, jnana, philosophical research of the supreme truth, and yoga, the linking process of spiritual realization. One who is not seriously inclined to put questions before the spiritual master need not accommodate a show-bottle spiritual master, nor should a person who may be a spiritual master for others pose to be So if he's unable to engage the disciple ultimately in the transcendental loving service of Lord Shri Krishna. So Prabhupada's encouraging us to follow in the footsteps of Vidura, to inquire. And we are also very blessed and fortunate that without us really seeking, Prabhupada as the spiritual guide has come into our life through his followers, through his books, through his teachings, through his movement. And in this way, Srila Prabhupada, who understands these truths, for example, Prabhupada is saying here, we must understand about karma, fruit of activities, jnana, philosophical research of the truth, supreme truth, and the linking process, spiritual realization. In Sri Shopanishad, Srila Prabhupada describes in that one verse where one should learn about missions, about matter and spirit. One must learn about the material world and spiritual world. Both need to be there. If you only learn about the material world, you become frustrated. And if you only learn about the spiritual world, then you become sahaja. You take spiritual life very cheaply. So, and you also don't, understand the danger of material life. So both needs to be there. And in that way, one's spiritual life becomes balanced because you understand the nature of the material world, the danger of the material world, and what the material world has to offer. And you can compare that to the nature of the spiritual world and what the spiritual world has to offer. And you'll see this throughout Prabhupada's Bhaktivedanta purports. Srila Prabhupada is very expert in delineating the truths on both parallel lines. Prabhupada will tell you what you cannot get in this material world and will tell you what you can get in the spiritual world. He'll compare, the unhappiness you can get in the material world and the happiness you can get in the spiritual world. Prabhupada always does this so that there's a clear comparison between matter and spirit. And Prabhupada is warning that just taking a spiritual master as fashion or just because everybody is taking, that is not really the proper way. And for a spiritual master to just take a disciple and not engage the disciple in transcendental loving service of Krishna, that also is not appropriate. Prabhupada would often make the point that the relationship between disciple and spiritual master is a serious business. Spiritual life is a serious business. So having a proper guide and being a proper disciple is key to the perfection of Krishna consciousness. Vidura was successful in approaching such a spiritual master like Maitreya, and he got the ultimate goal of life, bhakti unto Govinda. Thus, there was nothing to be known further about spiritual progress. And this statement is very true for us, that we are fortunate to have a spiritual guide and master like Srila Prabhupada. And therefore, who told us about the ultimate goal, which is bhakti unto Govinda. And thus there is nothing to be known further about spiritual progress. And we see Prabhupada knowing this truth, gives this truth, not just one time, but again and again. Throughout Srila Prabhupada's Bhaktivedanta purports and all his books, Prabhupada emphasized this point again and again from all different angles. One time Srila Prabhupada asked his disciple, why have I written so many books? Because as an author, if you want to give a certain message, you write a book and then it's done. So Prabhupada could have written one book and told about Krishna consciousness and done. But we find that the same point of bhakti unto Govinda, which is repeated again and again and again and again throughout the pages of Bhagavad Gita, throughout the pages of the Bhagavatam, throughout the pages of Chaitanya Charitamrita, So somebody would say, but why Srila Prabhupada repeating the same point again and again and again? You're not your body, you're a servant of Krishna, you need to surrender to Krishna, pure devotional service is the goal of life. Again and again. So when Prabhupada asked this disciple why he had written so many books, and the disciple was giving different reasons, Prabhupada said, the reason is to convince you of chanting Hare Krishna. So that means we may be chanting Hare Krishna, but we may not be as fully convinced as we should be. Because to the degree you are convinced, to that degree there is commitment. And to that degree that there is commitment, to that degree there is surrender to the Supreme Lord. We may be chanting Hare Krishna, having our hands in a bead bag, moving our lips and chanting, but we may not be present mentally or even consciously in that activity. I may be physically present and chanting, but because I'm not fully convinced, and therefore because I have lack of conviction, there is lack of commitment, and that is why I can be parrot, Prabhupada gives example like parrot, like chanting, but not really there with body, mind, and words, right? With one's heart, with one's consciousness. So that may be there in terms of the initial practice of Krishna consciousness. Therefore, as we progress in Krishna consciousness, the more convinced we become, then you find that that also impacts your chanting in a positive way. When you become fully convinced, completely convinced, and that can only be there when your heart is completely pure. As long as there's impurities in the heart, cheto darpana marjanam, when the mirror of the consciousness is not clean, then you cannot see your reflection. And as long as you cannot see your reflection completely, it implies that you will not be fully convinced and you will not be able to fully apply the process of Krishna consciousness in the most effective way. Therefore, we constantly continue to purify our life in the process of Krishna consciousness. And as we do that, we will find that also our dedication, our commitment, our attitude towards devotional service, all these things begin to change in a favorable way compared to before. So Prabhupada very mercifully is guiding all of us through this ultimate goal of bhakti unto Govinda. Text 3 and 4. Tam bandhunam agatam drishtva dharma putra sahanuja dhritarashtra yuyutsuscha suta sharad vata pritha Gandhari Draupadi Brahman Subhadra Chotara Kripi Anyascha Jamayo Pandor Gnata Ya Shuta Striya. When they saw Vidura return to the palace, all the inhabitants, Ma Yudhishthir, his younger brothers, Dhritarashtra, Satyaki, Sanjaya, Kripacharya, Kunti, Gandhari, Draupadi, Subhadra, Uttara, Kripi, many other wives of the Kauravas and other ladies with children all hurried to him in great delight. It so appeared that they had regained their consciousness after a long period. So clearly from this verse, we can appreciate the fact that Vidura was loved by everyone in Hastinapur, because we're hearing how they were all delighted to see him, and they hurried to receive him. And naturally, somebody who follows the path of Dharma, somebody who is a well-wisher, one can never forget such a well-wisher. Many years ago in Vrindavan, it was Mayapur, one of the Mayapur of Vrindavan, Brahmananda Prabhu, Garga Muni Prabhu was giving a talk, and he was speaking about Srila Prabhupada as a well-wisher, not just an ever well-wisher. And he was, as he was speaking, him, Brahmananda, many of their disciples, when they just speak about Srila Prabhupada, they cannot hold back their tears because of the love that they have for Srila Prabhupada. So he was making the point that, whenever Prabhupada would write a letter, Prabhupada would end of the letter. Firstly, Prabhupada would start off the letter. May this meet you in the best of health. So Prabhupada's blessing good health on all his disciples, because health is a very important aspect of spiritual life. Prabhupada had written a note which was stuck in the kitchen, in the temples. And that note, Prabhupada said that first health, then sadhana, then service. In that sequence should be priority. Very often we may engage in service neglecting health, or engage in sadhana neglecting health. But health is important because this is not a sprint. Spiritual life is not a sprint. It's a marathon. And therefore you need good health to endure the marathon of Krishna consciousness. So one should look after one's health. And also the body is a very important instrument required for you to practice Krishna consciousness. Without the body, you cannot go back to Godhead. Even though we say not your body, but without your body, you can't go back to Godhead. You need your body. So if you need this body to become Krishna conscious, then it's important to look after the body to be Krishna conscious. So health first. And then sadhana. Practicing the rules and regulations of spiritual life. And then engaging in devotional service. So Prabhupada obviously wished everyone best in health. And then he said, Prabhupada always sign off the letter, your ever well-wisher, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. And he was making the point that, you can say somebody is a well-wisher, but to say ever well-wisher, that means beyond time, beyond this life. That's rare. Only a great person like Srila Prabhupada can make that statement. Your ever well-wisher, from now till eternity. We may have, we may have well-wishing friends, guardians, parents, etc. amidst us, and no doubt they may wish you well. But for somebody to eternally wish you well, and not only eternally wish you well, but be able to be there at every point in your life for the rest of your existence, beyond this material body and beyond this life, that person, if one has that person, then that's glorious. That's glorious. That should give us faith and fearlessness. That as long as we have Srila Prabhupada's protection, shelter, guidance, then there should not be any fear, no matter what the world presents to us. So Vidura was a well-wishing friend of everyone. We heard he did not, he wasn't biased. He did not make decisions based on sense gratification. He made decisions based on the truth and what was good for everyone. So naturally, people were attracted to him for counseling. And when he returned, they were overjoyed. So in the purport, Prabhupada begins to describe these personalities that were mentioned in the verse. So we are getting the association of these personalities in the Mahabharata. Now, here's an interesting perspective. The personalities in Mahabharata are also not ordinary. Why? Because the Mahabharata is a play directed by Krishna. So Krishna is the scriptwriter, Krishna is the director, Krishna is also the main actor, and Krishna has also chosen the actors to act in this drama on the stage of earth. So anyone that is participating in the Mahabharata, it is not by chance. You know, you can't just become an actor. You can't become an actor to say, okay, Krishna, I'll act for you. Nope, Krishna has to choose you. Or you can't just gate crash as an actor. You have to be chosen by Krishna. So Krishna has chosen his entourage to enact this wonderful drama of the Mahabharata. And therefore these personalities, and as we hear some of these great personalities, they're extraordinary, their qualities. And this is what comes out in the Ramayana, in the Mahabharata. What comes out very strikingly in these histories is the exemplary qualities, exceptional qualities, refined qualities that these personalities had, the refined culture that existed during these times compared to now. It's like now it's very gross. People are very reactive, based on sensuous and sense gratificatory decisions, whereas in the Mahabharata, in the Ramayana, there's a culture, there's a foundation of the mode of goodness, there's exemplary qualities that are presented. So let us read Srila Prabhupada's purport and these personalities that Prabhupada is sharing. So first, he speaks about Gandhari, the ideal chaste lady in the history of the world. So there are many chaste ladies. Gandhari is one of them, Parvati, Radharani, Draupadi is also mentioned. Many chaste ladies are described. Sita Devi. So Gandhari is one. She was the daughter of Maj Subala, the king of Gandhara, now Gandhara in Kabul. And in her maiden state, she worshipped Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva is generally worshipped by Hindu maidens to get a good husband. Gandhari satisfied Lord Shiva. And by his benediction, she obtained 100 sons. She was betrothed to Dhritarashtra, despite he's been blind forever. When Gandhari came to know that her would-be husband was a blind man, to follow her life companion, she decided to become voluntarily blind. So she wrapped her eyes with many silk linens, and she was married to Dhritarashtra under the guidance of her elder brother Shakuni. So this act of blindfolding herself gave her great power. She would not want to be more qualified than a husband in terms of her eyesight. And she also wanted to experience the world through the eyes of a husband. So she voluntarily blindfolded her, her eyes. And because of this sacrifice, we see Dhritarashtra was born blind, therefore it wasn't a sacrifice. She voluntarily blindfolded herself, which means she took on undue suffering that was not really due to her, but because of her consciousness and wanting to not, let's say, be more advanced or have an advantage over the husband, she blindfolded her eyes. Now, somebody could question, well, if she didn't blindfold her eyes, then she could even serve her husband even better. So why she didn't do that? Well, there may be many reasons why she didn't do that, but the scriptwriter, the director, who is Krishna, decided to write the script in this way, to glorify her in this way, and also to show the power of sacrifice, to show the power of chastity. Because with blindfolding her eyes, she was able to gain so much piety that with that piety, she was able to make Duryodhana's body invincible. Every part of his body that she gazed on became metal-like, steel-like, stainless steel-like. He could not be killed. We know the Mahabharata, we know that Krishna, who was the director and the scriptwriter, decided, yes, it cannot be that way and I need to intervene. So Krishna intervenes to make sure that Duryodhana never wins. But she blindfolded her. And in fact, because of this, that she was marrying a blind king, Shakuni did not like that. And the Mahabharata describes that Shakuni basically wanted to destroy Hastinapur. And he made a vow that he would destroy Hastinapur. Therefore, we find that all the evil doings of Shakuni is there simply because he did not like this idea that she had to, go through this pain of blindfolding herself and then serving a king who's blind, etc. She was the most beautiful girl of her time, and she was equally qualified by her womanly qualities, which endeared every member of the Kaurava court. But despite all her good qualities, she had the natural frailties of a woman, and she was envious of Kunti when the latter gave birth to a male child. Both the queens were pregnant, but Kunti first gave birth to a child. Now, in a royal family, this is very important, because in a royal family, the first child will inherit the throne. And because Kunti gave birth to the first child, well, then Yudhishthira was going to inherit the throne, and she wanted to inherit the throne. So she was envious of that. Thus, Gandhari became angry and gave a blow to her own abdomen. As a result, she gave birth to a lump of flesh only. But since she was a devotee of Vyasadeva, by the incarnation of Vyasadeva, the lump was divided into 100 parts. And each part gradually developed to become a male child. So this was the first test tube babies that were produced. In the Vedic system, different sciences is there. So Vyasadeva was very expert, and they took that lump of flesh, divided into 100 pieces, and I think it was 101 or 100 pieces, and the sons of Dhritarashtra all gave birth through the test tube, the tubes that Vyasadeva had set up. Thus, her ambition to become a mother of 100 sons was fulfilled. So this is how 100 sons were born. Because you could imagine giving birth to 100 sons, right? That would be austere. That would be deadly. But She gave birth to one lump of flesh, and that was divided. And she began to nourish all the children according to her exalted position. When the intrigue of the battle of Kurukshetra was going on, she was not in favor of fighting with the Pandavas. Rather, she blamed Dhritarashtra, her husband, for such a fratricidal war. She desired that the state be divided into two parts, for the sons of Pandu and her own. She was very affected when all her sons died in battle, in the battle of Kurukshetra, and she wanted to curse Bhishma and Yudhishthira. But she was checked by Vyasadeva. Her mourning over the death of Duryodhan and Dushashan before Lord Krishna was very pitiful, and Lord Krishna pacified her by transcendental message. She was equally aggrieved on the death of Karna, and she described to Lord Krishna the lamentation of Karna's wife. She was pacified by Srila Vyasadeva when he showed her dead sons, then promoted to the heavenly kingdoms. She died along with her husband in the jungle of the Himalayas near the mouth of the Ganges. She burnt in a forest fire. Yudhishthira performed the death ceremony of his uncle and aunt. We're going to hear about how Vidura is going to preach to Dhritarashtra, and when Dhritarashtra decides to leave, she also leaves with her husband. And when her husband Dhritarashtra perfects his life and returns back to this spiritual world, she enters into the fire pit, performs a sati rite, because it's explained that where a chaste wife gets the same destination of the husband, even if she does not practice the principles or the process. Dhritarashtra perfected his life by the practice of the process of Krishna consciousness at that time, and she then achieves the same destination because she was serving him faithfully. Then Queen Kunti, Prita, the daughter of Maj, Surasen, and sister of Vasudeva, Lord Krishna's father. Later, she was adopted by Maj Kunti Bhoja, and hence she is known as Kunti. And we heard about the life of Kunti and her exalted qualities already. She is the incarnation of the success potency of the personality of Godhead. So here's a glimpse. Remember I made the point that in the Mahabharata, Krishna, he decides all the actors. And the actors are different personalities, great exalted beings, sages, demigods, Krishna's eternal associates, Krishna's energies. They're all taking part in Krishna's pastimes. So here is one example of an energy of Krishna taking part in Krishna's pastimes as Queen Kunti, the success potency of the personality of Godhead. The heavenly damsels from the upper planets used to visit the palace of King Kunti Bhoj, and Kunti was engaged for their reception. She also served the great mystic sage Durvasa, and being satisfied by her faithful service, Durvasa Muni gave her a mantra by which it was possible for her to call for any demigod she pleased. As a matter of inquisitiveness, she had once called for the sun god, who desired a couplement with her, but she declined. But the sun god assured her immunity from virgin adulteration, and she agreed to his proposal. As a result of this couplement, she became pregnant, and Karna was born by her. By the grace of the sun, she again turned into a virgin girl. But being afraid of her parents, she quitted the newly born child Karna. After that, when she actually selected her own husband, she preferred Pandu to be her husband. Maj Pandu later wanted to retire from family life and adopt the renounced order of life. Kunti refused to allow her husband to adopt such life, but at At last, Maj Pandu gave her permission to become a mother of sons by calling some other suitable personalities. Kunti did not accept this proposal at first, but when vivid examples were set by Pandu, she agreed. By dint of the mantra awarded by Durasa Muni, she called for Dharmaraj, and Yudhishthira was born. She called for the demigod Vayu, air, and thus Bhima was born. She called for Indra, king of heaven, and thus Arjuna was born. The other two sons, namely Nakul and Sahadev, were begotten by Pandu himself in the womb of Madri. And later on, Maj Pandu died at an early age, for which Kunti was so aggrieved that she fainted. Two co-wives, namely Kunti and Madri, decided that Kunti should live for the maintenance of the 5 minor children, the Pandavas, and Madri should accept the sati ritual by meeting voluntary death along with her husband. This agreement was endorsed by the great sages like Satashringa and others present on the occasion. So Prabhupada gives this summary of Queen Kunti, whose qualities we heard, exceptional personality, very, very wonderful prayers of Queen Kunti, and extremely Krishna conscious personality. Prabhupada loved the prayers. Later on, when the Pandavas were banished from the kingdom by the intrigues of Duryodhana, Kunti followed her sons, and she equally faced all sorts of difficulties during those days. During the forest fire, one demon girl, Hidimba, wanted Bhima as a husband. Bhima refused, but when a girl approached Kunti and Yudhishthira, they ordered Bhima to accept her proposal and give her a son. As a result of this combination, Gatotkacha was born, and he fought very valiantly with his father against the Kauravas. In their forest life, they lived with a Brahmana family that was in trouble because of one Bakasura demon. And Kunti ordered Bhima to kill the Bakasura to protect the Brahmana family against troubles created by the demon. She advised Yudhishthira to start for Panchaladesh. Draupadi was gained in this Panchaladesh by Arjuna, but by order of Kunti, all 5 of the Pandava brothers became equally the husbands of Panchali or Draupadi. She was married with 5 Pandavas in the presence of Vyasadeva. Kunti Devi never forgot her first child, Karna. And after Karna's death in the battle of Kurukshetra, she lamented and admitted before her other sons that Karna was her eldest son prior to her marriage with Maj Pandu. Her prayers for the Lord after the battle of Kurukshetra, when Lord Krishna was going back home, are excellently explained. Later, she went to the forest with Gandhari for severe penance. She used to take meals after each 30 days. She finally sat down in profound meditation and later burned to ashes in a forest fire. So exceptionally amazing personalities. And Prabhupada, as we mentioned, loved her prayers, very, very Krishna conscious prayers, and many, many instructions are there in the prayers that we also covered in the previous chapter of the first canto. Now Prabhupada speaks about Draupadi, the most chaste daughter of Maj Drupad, and partially an incarnation of goddess Sachi, the wife of Indra. Maj Drupada performed a great sacrifice under the superintendence of the sage Yaja. By his first offering, Drishtadumna was born, and by the second offering, Draupadi was born. She is therefore the sister of Drishtadumna, and she is also named Panchali. The 5 Pandavas married her as a common wife, and each of them begot a son in her. Maj Yudhishthira begot a son named Pratibit. Bhimsen begot a son named Sutasoma. Arjuna begot Shrutakirti. Nakula begot Shatanika, and Sahadev begot Shutrakarma. She is described as a most beautiful lady, equal to her mother-in-law Kunti. During her birth, there was an aerial message that she should be called Krishna. That means aerial message means voice voice note from the sky, just like when Krishna, when Kamsa was taking his sister, then there was a aerial voice, no sound. So that's the aerial message Prabhupada was talking about, that she should be called Krishna. So Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and Krishna, you'll see the A with a stroke on top, that is long A, that is a name of Draupadi. It's also the name of Yamuna. And because her name Krishna is connected to Krishna, she was very intimately related to Krishna as Krishna's friend, devotee. And in fact, she also had the same complexion of Krishna. She was born from fire and an extraordinary personality. So they, in the Mahabharata, her glories are also described. She was no ordinary personality. She was not born in an ordinary way. Therefore, we can understand that her life and the qualities are all extraordinary. Because she was born in fire, when Drupad was offering the ahuti, he offered the ahuti and he took red powder and he offered that, and therefore she became fiery, also appearing from fire. And he also took white powder and offered that in the fire. And as he was offering the white powder, he was contemplating that this child should be able to go through the most difficult situations in life and still stay white, clean, and pure. And Draupadi was then born from the fire. Right, aerial message. The same message was declared. The same message also declared that she was born to kill many Kshatriya. By dint of her blessings from Shankara, she was awarded 5 husbands, equally qualified. So it is described that in a past life, she was worshipping Lord Shiva to get a husband. And when Lord Shiva asked, when she was praying, she said, I want a husband, I want a husband, I want a husband, I want a husband 5 times. Therefore, she got 5 husbands. That was one version. And the other version was she asked for a husband that had exceptional qualities of Dharma. She asked for a husband that was extremely powerful. She asked for a husband that was expert in archery. She asked for a husband that was intelligent, that was very beautiful, etc. So because she was asking these extraordinary qualities in a husband, Lord Shiva said, well, all the qualities that you asked to be in a husband cannot be in one person. It's just not possible. The only way to make it possible is if I give you 5 husbands that covers all these exceptional qualities you asked. So then that is how in the next life she actually gets 5 husbands with these exceptional qualities. She married the Pandavas during her exile in the forest, and when they went back to March Drupad, but when they went back home, March Drupad gave them immense wealth as a dowry. She was well versed in all the daughters-in-law of Dhritarashtra, she was well received by all the daughters-in-law by Dhritarashtra. When she was lost in a gambling game, she was forcibly dragged into assembly hall, and an attempt was made by Dushashan to see her naked beauty. Even though there were elderly persons like Bhishma and Drona present, she was a great devotee of Lord Krishna, and by her praying, Lord Krishna himself became an unlimited garment to save her from insult, an unlimited sari. And by her praying, the Lord himself became an unlimited garment to save her from an insult. A demon by the name Jatasura kidnapped her, but her second husband, Bhimasen, killed the demon and saved her. She saved the Pandavas from the curse of Maharishi Dhruvarsa by the grace of Lord Krishna. When the Pandavas lived incognito in the palace of Virat, Kichaka was attracted by her exquisite beauty, and by arrangement of Bhima, the devil was killed and she was saved. She was very much aggrieved by her 5 sons, when her 5 sons were killed by Ashwatthama, and at the last stage, she accompanied her husband Yudhishthira and others and fell on the way. The cause of her falling was explained by Yudhishthira, but when Yudhishthira entered the heavenly planets, he saw Draupadi gloriously present there as the goddess of fortune in the heavenly planet. So it's interesting, Prabhupada mentions this point also about Draupadi, the Pandavas reaching heavenly planets. In the previous purport, we heard about the Kauravas in the heavenly planets. And one may see these personalities face value and therefore misunderstand, like how can Duryodhan go to the heavenly planets? I mean, okay, Pandavas, yes, right? But Duryodhan, the Kauravas, no man. But we have to understand that this is a drama that Krishna is staging, and through this drama, Krishna is presenting many philosophical points, many points of wisdom, many points of rules and regulations and instructions to guide humanity, to evolve humanity to a higher level of Krishna consciousness. And the Mahabharata covers a whole range of qualities and characteristics, aspects like drama, intrigue, romance, comedy, chivalry, tragedy, warfare, power, politics, Krishna consciousness, in all different aspects, through a story, through a history, through a drama. And therefore, the instructions of the Mahabharata is also very relevant and practical for the people in Kali Yuga. Then Prabhupada talks about Shri Subhadra Devi, the daughter of Vasudeva and sister of Lord Shri Krishna. She was not only a very dear daughter of Vasudeva, but also a very dear sister to both Krishna and Baladev. The 2 brothers and sisters are represented in the famous Jagannath temple of Puri, and the temple is still visited by thousands of pilgrims daily. This temple is in remembrance of Lord's visit at Kurukshetra during an occasion of solar eclipse and his subsequent meeting with the residents of Vrindavan. The meeting of Radha and Krishna during the occasion is a very pathetic story. And Lord Shri Chaitanya, in the ecstasy of Radhavani, always pinned for Lord Shri Krishna at Jagannath Puri. While Arjuna was at Dwarka, he wanted to have Subhadra as his queen, and he expressed his desire to Lord Krishna. Shri Krishna knew that his elder brother, Lord Baladev, was arranging her marriage elsewhere, and since he did not dare to go against the arrangement of Baladev, he advised Arjuna to kidnap Subhadra. So when all of them were at a pleasure trip on the Raivata hill, Arjuna managed to kidnap Subhadra according to the plan of Shri Krishna. Shri Baladev was very angry at Arjuna and he wanted to kill him, but Lord Krishna implored his brother to excuse Arjuna. Then Subhadra was duly married with Arjuna, and Abhimanyu was born of Subhadra. At the premature death of Abhimanyu, Subhadra was very mortified, and with the birth of Parikshit, she was very happy and solaced. So just an interesting point. I was reading, Subhadra is the youngest sister of Krishna. So she was born when Krishna happened to come to Mathura and kill Kamsa. Yogamaya is the elder sister of Krishna. She was born in Vrindavan as the daughter of Yashoda and carried by Vasudev in exchange of Vasudev Krishna. She was brought back to the cell in Mathura. And when Kamsa next day tried to kill her, she then obviously expanded herself and manifested herself. So that is the elder sister of Krishna, and not Subhadra. Subhadra was born later as the younger sister of Krishna. Text 5. Pratyujagmu praharshenam pranam tanva ivagatam abhisangamya vidivat pariswanga pariswanga biva dane. With great delight they all approached him as if life had returned to their bodies. They welcomed each other in due manner by exchanging obeisances and embracing. So they received Vidura very, very nicely. Prabhupada in the purport says, in the absence of consciousness, the limbs of the body remain inactive. But when consciousness returns, the limbs and senses become active, and existence itself becomes delightful. Vidura was so dear to the members of the Kaurava family that his long absence from the palace was comparable to inactivity. All of them were feeling acute separation from Vidura, and therefore his return to the palace was joyful for all. So Prabhupada is speaking about the feeling of acute separation. And interesting in terms of the verse and Prabhupada's purport, in the absence of consciousness, the limbs of the body remain inactive. Right? So we know that when the soul leaves the body, which means consciousness leaves the body because consciousness is a symptom of the soul, then the limbs become inactive. So that is clear to appreciate and understand. Then Prabhupada says, but when consciousness returns, the limbs and senses become active and existence itself becomes delightful. So that is also true. When the soul comes back into a body, then there's activity and then there's life, and we can be happy and enjoy. Now Prabhupada says, Vidura was so dear to the members of the Kaurava family that his long absence from the palace was comparable to inactivity. Because Vidura was a well-wisher and he left, the Kaurava family felt like their consciousness left. And even though they were engaged in activities, it's considered inactivity. And when Vidura returns, it's like consciousness returning, and then you become happy. So that is also true in relation to us. Krishna has left us for so long, or we could put it the other way, we left Krishna for so long. And because we have distanced ourselves from Krishna, who's really the life force of all living entities, even though we may be acting, we are inactive. Therefore, even in the Bhagavatam, it is described that without Krishna consciousness, even though a human being may be acting, he's really not acting. It's like he's like, they say like living dead. You're like a zombie. So by us being separated from Krishna, we are living and acting, but really unconscious. We can even say that we're unconscious of our true relationship. So we're living on a false platform, on a false basis, that I'm this body, and therefore really living on the platform of a temporary, illusory existence. When we become Krishna conscious, now we are bringing Krishna back into our life. And when we bring Krishna back into our life, it's like bringing consciousness back into our life. It's like Vidura coming back. We will now become joyful. So it's a very wonderful analogy or experience that the residents of Hastinapur are feeling, that they're feeling acute separation from Vidura. And now when they seeing Vidura again, that pleasure is returning to be in his association. We will also experience the same as we become Krishna conscious and Krishna begins to come into our life. We will also feel that joy. Now, this feeling of acute separation, I just like to expand this a little. The process of Krishna consciousness is really an activity of realizing the truth that we have been separated from Krishna, even though we're eternal servants of Krishna. That is in essence what Krishna consciousness is about. We are never perfectly situated. We are never happy, and never will we be happy. We will never be happy if we have not revived our eternal relationship with Krishna. So we have fallen so far away from Krishna, we have forgotten Krishna for so long, that that person who is really the source and an integral part of our existence, we don't even remember him. We don't even know him. That's how far we have fallen away from Krishna. Prabhupada is now introducing Krishna to us in the form of Bhagavad Gita and his words, in the form of Krishna book, in the form of the Bhagavatam, in the form of Chaitanya Charitamrita, in the form of the holy name, in the form of Krishna Prasad, in the form of the deities. So the more we bring Krishna in our life, through the process that Prabhupada has given us, what will happen is we will slowly begin to revive our remembrance and knowledge of Krishna and our service to Krishna. And when that happens, we will feel that acute separation from Krishna. And feeling that acute separation from Krishna is really the sign of advancement. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was feeling this acute separation of Krishna and always calling out to Krishna. Prabhupada explains the Goswamis, they were always crying, where is Krishna? Where is Krishna? So this is the perfection that when we realize we have separated ourselves from Krishna, and when we become Krishna conscious and feel that actually I'm separated from Krishna and I need to return to Krishna, Krishna, where are you? And I'm feeling that separation and I'm crying for Krishna. That is the perfection of Krishna consciousness. His Holiness Gaura Maharaj would make the point. And Prabhupada also makes this point in his Bhakti and the purpose that Krishna consciousness is all about crying for Krishna. So we have to learn to cry for Krishna through the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra. So one disciple asked Gaura Maharaj that when I'm chanting, I don't feel that acute separation, and I can't cry for Krishna. So then Gogana Maharaj said, if you can't cry for Krishna, because you're not feeling that acute separation, you don't realize that acute separation, then cry that you cannot cry. That cry, I'm so fallen, and you cry because you're so fallen that I can't cry for Krishna. So then he said, Guru Maharaj, I have another problem. I'm so fallen that I cannot cry for Krishna. And I'm so fallen that I cannot even cry that I cannot cry for Krishna. So Gogana Maharaj made a very, very profound point. He said, yes, you can't cry for Krishna. And you can't cry that you can't cry for Krishna. And when I leave this world, then you will cry. And I thought that was profound. That even the attachment to the spiritual master is also very, very powerful and Krishna conscious. Because just like attachment to Srila Prabhupada is attachment to Krishna. Attachment to Prabhupada's teachings is attachment to Krishna. Attachment to Srila Prabhupada's mission is attachment to Krishna. So if you attach to the spiritual master, and that's easier and more practical and more relevant and more powerful, and we can experience that separation. So when the spiritual master leaves and we cry because we're feeling that acute separation, that is very purifying and very powerful Krishna conscious experience, to come to the realization that that's how I should be crying for Krishna. So when Vidura returns, the residents of Hastinapur are extremely joyful, receiving their well-wisher, their guide, in the form of Vidura. Text 6. Mumucha mumuchu prema bashpongam vira hot kantya kartara rajatam arya ham chakre krita sang na pratigraham. Due to anxieties and long separation, they all cried out of affection. King Yudhishthir then arranged to offer sitting accommodations and a reception. Text 7. Tambuk tavavantam vishrantam asinam sukham asane prashrayavan nato raja praharate samcha shrinvatam. After Vidura ate sumptuously and took sufficient rest, he was comfortably seated. Then the king began to speak to him, and all who were present there listened. So they wonderfully received Vidura, sumptuously fed him, allowed him to rest after his journey. And now they all were very, very curious to learn from Vidura about his journey. Naturally, they were concerned because he was banished without anything. So they want to know, how did he survive? What did he do? And from next week, we will hear about that description. So Prabhupada in the purport talks about Vedic reception. King Yudhishthir was expert in reception also. Even in this case of his family members, Vidura was well received by all the family members by exchange of embraces and obeisances. After that, bathing and arrangement for a sumptuous dinner were made, and then he was given sufficient rest. After finishing his rest, he was offered a comfortable seat to sit, and then the king began to talk about all the happenings, both family and otherwise. That is the proper way to receive a beloved friend or even an enemy. So that's a very important point. According to Indian moral codes, even an enemy received at home should be so well received that he will not feel any fearful situation. An enemy is always afraid of his enemy, but this should not be so when he is received at home by his enemy. This means that a person, when received at home, should be treated as a relative. So what to speak of a family member like Vidura, who was a well-wisher for all the members of the family. Thus Yudhishthira Maharaj began to speak in the presence of all the other members. So this was Vedic system. Any guest that comes to your house, Atiti Devo Bhava, right, was treated like God. It's like God coming to one's house. This was the culture, this was the system. So here we see, even though Vidura was naturally a family member, he was received. And this culture was there. We find that when even an enemy would come to the Pandavas, the enemy was received. That was the culture. And then after being received, given sumptuous food, rest, etc., then the next day, okay, as a messenger, please tell us, right? Or even as an enemy, please speak. So the enemy was treated according to the circumstance, as if they're coming home as a guest. And the Pandavas followed this very, very diligently. But we find that Duryodhana and the Dhritarashtra, they did not follow this etiquette. For example, when Krishna appeared, when Krishna came as a messenger, Duryodhana wanted to kill Krishna. He wanted to put Krishna in prison. So he had no etiquette, no culture. But the Pandavas followed this etiquette and culture. And that brings us to the end of these verses, introducing the arrival of Vidura. Next week, 8 to 13, we will be covering the discussion that Vidura is going to share. Pantarat Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Nitai Bhukhamande, Hari Hari Bol. Any questions or comments anyone has, you can type in the chat, or you also can unmute and ask. Anyone? While those of you who are typing, if you're typing, I'll just give you a few minutes. I'll just share. When Srila Prabhupada introduced Kartik, then His Holiness Jayapatak Maharaj sent a letter to Srila Prabhupada inquiring how to observe Kartik. And it's interesting, Prabhupada makes the point in that letter that Kartik is really for new people. For those who are already Krishna conscious, then they're already following the path of Krishna consciousness, they're already following the process of Krishna consciousness. But Kartik is really for new people. It's to attract new people and to introduce new people. And Prabhupada gave the example, just like a businessman, he's got excess products, and because he's got excess products, he's not creating a sale for his current customers. He brings the price down to attract new customers. So Kartik is very important to attract and bring new people into the fold of Krishna consciousness through the offering of lamps, singing Damodarstikam. So that was an interesting letter that Srila Prabhupada wrote back in terms of the month of Kartik. Okay, I see there's no questions. Thank you very much for your attendance. So we will continue next week and hear Vidura's response to Maj Yudhishthir's question, and also why Vidura returned. Mother Les says, Hare Krishna Prabhu, thanks for the glorious Krishna Katha. It's so amazing to see these personalities as seen through the eyes of Prabhupada. Somehow I see and appreciate it even more. Thanks for sharing. Yes. It's described just as when a parrot picks a fruit, may be very tasty and juicy. And when a parrot pecks on that fruit, it makes it even more tasty and relishable. It's just the science or nature that Krishna has introduced like that. So similarly, when the acharyas, so for example, the acharyas are sharing about these personalities, Prabhupada studied and realized the subject matter of the acharyas, and then presents that same knowledge to us in a way that is Prabhupada's style, according to time, place, and circumstance that we can digest, then that becomes even more relishable and tasty. So even the verses, for example, the verses of the Bhagavatam, when they're expounded by Prabhupada and they're given by Prabhupada, it becomes even more relishable, more relevant, and more powerful. That is why the Bhaktivedanta purports are even more powerful than the verses themselves, because it's expanding, Prabhupada's expanding the right points that we need to understand in the purports. Because if we read the verse, and don't have a purport, we may just glean whatever our consciousness can extract. But Srila Prabhupada presents in his purport what is essential and relevant for us to know and at least hear, if we cannot at all memorize, but at least associate and hear. So yes, we are blessed and fortunate that Srila Prabhupada has given us these wonderful gifts so that we can associate and perfect our life. Thank you very much. Granthraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Nitai Gopramanande, Hari Hari Bol.